Welcome, everyone, to our keynote on the topic of playing to win, the importance of teamwork, overcoming adversity, and trailblazing in uncertain times. My name is G. Rittenhouse, and I'm honored to introduce our very special guest today. For those of you who are fans of the world's game, or as we call it here in the States, soccer, you already know her. For the very few that don't, she is a two-time Olympian, winning the gold medal in the 2012 London Games. She is a three-time FIFA Women's World Cup participant, winning 2 golds and 1 silver. Let me just say, you and Sue just crushed it at this year's ESPYs. Finally, she is a wonderful individual, a tremendous activist. Please join me in giving a huge virtual welcome to Megan Rapinoe. Megan, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, as well as you can do in a moment we have never seen before, and likely in our lifetimes we'll never see again, hopefully. But yeah, I'm overall managing and doing pretty well. I feel very lucky.
Megan, thank you for joining us today. Like you say, it must be in a very strange time for you, given the shortened season. You've probably given a million of these virtual interviews. You're much better at it than I am. I see you everywhere on TV, your channel. You've just been crushing it. But imagine right now, there are 80,000 people clapping for you. You can't hear them, but they are right there with you. Welcome. I just want to give you some background about the audience and where we're coming from. Today's audience is just full of cybersecurity professionals. And the two things that you should know about them are, one, that this group faces active adversaries. You probably hear them in the news that are trying to steal or ransom bank account information, company data, hospital records. They're right on the front lines protecting those communities. And second, they come from an amazingly diverse set of backgrounds. There's no one way of becoming a security professional, one career path and whatnot. They grow up doing so many things and then attracted to security. And when I heard that you were coming, it reminded me so much of your career when you were growing up, basketball, track, soccer, all these things. Tell us a little bit of how did you get to soccer when you're so talented at so many different ones?
I mean, I think I was always most talented at soccer. Maybe I was talented when I was younger at those other things, but I think that would have fizzled out pretty quickly. But my older brother played soccer, back, I guess, when I was growing up. I think it was a growing sport, but it really obviously has grown so much since then. So it wasn't super popular. I'm from a pretty small town in Northern California. So, just played in the rec leagues and all that, but we didn't even really have a competitive team, like the top level competitive team in Reading. So ended up having to travel to that. But there was always just this sense of, I like the team sports, I think, better, but I feel like in soccer, you get to do both. It's very much kind of an individual thing. And you get to express yourself and sort of have your very unique personality show on the field while also being a part of a bigger team. So it always I think it was the freedom of it as well. There's not that many rules. I always would forget the plays in basketball, and baseball had too many rules, and softball, and it was too slow. So I think there's a sense of freedom that I feel on the soccer field that, drew me in then, and that I still feel to this day.
And so it's just the classic story, the older brother setting up cones, making you do drills and pushing you hard. And by the way, I mean, the individual team, we're going to hold that thought because we're going to come back to that because you're essentially famous about that point. In addition to being a champion, you're also a leader. Was that always true as well? Or was there a time, a coach or a play where people just started looking to you as that leader?
No, I don't think no, not from a very young age. I wasn't I was always a twin as well. And Rachel was much more of the leader, I think, amongst us, especially as we got kind of into middle school and high school. She was, sort of the more assertive one, and I just kind of like followed her, and I was perfectly happy to just be in her shadow and be able to kind of follow in her footsteps. But I think as I've gotten older, I, sort of matured into myself. And then really like what happened on the national team, like everybody retired. So then all of a sudden I went from being like just sort of like a middle age player in the, sort of younger ones, but like growing up. And then all of a sudden, me and a few other players, we were like, I guess we're the veterans. And so then it took, a little bit of time to really kind of grow and mature into that role. And, having the benefit also, the national team is just a little different because, some players have been on there 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and they might be a starter on the team, might be one of the best players. But to have the knowledge of, a long career on the national team and how to navigate things, I think like you sort of just naturally, by osmosis, even like just get that sort of leadership. You kind of know the ropes and you can help people, bring along. And then I think couple that with what this team has taken on off of the field, things I'm very passionate about, but also feel very comfortable speaking out. I think those two kind of mended together a little bit, especially in the last couple of years, has kind of put me in that leadership position.
I'm also impressed on how the team brings in the young players and not just in, at the end where the game is already decided, but like in key situations, you have that young group in there as well that then can gain that experience and continue through the evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the sort of putting the young player into a position where it's like, what can you handle at whatever age? We're not going to ask our young player to also, be one of the, leaders on the team and always be talking to the media and going back and forth with the coaches. And so it's like, we don't ask that. And I think like older players, just because you've been around more, you have a little bit more comfortability or capacity with that. Whereas like all we really want to do is get the best out of everyone. So as a young player, like they do need to be more carefree. Like I remember even just my experiences from, my first World Cup to now, I'm like, oh my God, I just was like, this is awesome. You just get to kind of show up and play. And then going through this one, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much more behind the scenes than I ever knew. But I wouldn't have been able to handle it back then. I wouldn't have known even what to do. And now, it's easier in that sense, but also it's like, you need those players you need that carefreeness, because if everyone was trying to do everything all the time, it would be just a big mess.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I've never experienced it, but for me, just walking on a field in front of 100,000 people just would be, that's an experience you have to get used to in and of itself, for sure. It's incredible. Besides the teamwork, it's, we're also focusing on overcoming adversity and trailblazing. Persistence in the face of cyber threats is such a key part of our industry. You make it look so easy as a world-class athlete and champion, even on the biggest moments, like the penalty kick in the finals. I mean, like, what goes on in your head when like everything stops, everything is focused on you at the biggest times? How do you deal with that?
I mean, to be honest, speaking of cybersecurity, I feel like when I get, like Snapchat, here's your verification code. I get more freaked out about that because I'm like, who's trying to get into my, I don't even think Snapchat. That's
Don't click on it.
I know. I'm like, who's trying to get in there? I mean, I think a lot of it is practice. I've gone through a lot of these moments, and it's impossible to replicate being in the most pressurized moment. But I always try to, at least to myself, like verbalize the worst possible thing that can happen. Like the worst thing that could happen was, we're in the, World Cup final and we get a penalty kick and we're in, a shootout and I'm the last one. And like, I lose the World Cup for my team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what are you going to do? It's like, that'd be terrible. I would hate that, but I don't know. It's like, I've been fortunate to win most of the games in my career. I've also lost a lot and lost some big ones, lost, 2 club championships and lost in an Olympics and lost in a World Cup final. So, I kind of just try to take it as it comes. And, I think routine as well in those moments really helped me. So I just try to do the same thing every time. I think it's almost like a meditative process of just trying to calm down and taking myself out of the moment almost, and just, focusing on what is in front of me. And then just relying, I guess, on a lot of practice and talent and hoping for the best. And if it goes horribly wrong, I guess it just goes horribly wrong, but it normally doesn't. So
I like probably every kid have always done like 3, 2, 1 but that's very different than actually standing up and doing it. So that's incredible. And in terms of persistence, early in your career, sophomore year, you tore your ACL. Come back in your junior year, a couple games in, it happens again. Like how do you just sit there and go like, I got it, like work through that, I'm going to come back yet a third time, like, that just is a lot of mental fortitude to take seasons off just to train like that. How do you do that?
I think I have like some kind of short-term memory loss with things, honestly, because I get asked this a lot. I think the way that I try to approach it is like a sort of day by day, week by week. I think you can get very easily overwhelmed if you're trying to solve the whole thing or, contextualize the whole thing at one time, particularly with an injury with an athlete. Yeah, your whole life changed, you're in a way, your whole life is taken away. This is, something, especially when I got injured as a pro, it was like, this is my livelihood. This is potentially my career. This is everything I've worked for. This might be the end of my career. What does that mean? This is my financial security, all of that. So I really do try to take it back to like, what can I do today and what am I focused on this week? And then, I think if you get into that groove, and sometimes, of course, I'm, sitting there on the couch wallowing and just a big pile of nothing. But I think when I start to get into that groove, I get 2 and 3 and 4 months down the road, and, you're sort of the culmination of all these days that you've put in a lot of work and focused on, and you're that much closer to your goal. And you can kind of look at what you can do and what you have done as opposed to everything you can't do yet. Mm-hmm. And so that helps me personally. I think otherwise it's way too overwhelming and stressful to live in that space. With some of my knee injuries, it's like, okay, you can't play for 6 to 9 months. If every day I'm thinking, I can't play, then it's like going to be a terrible existence. So what can you do in the moment? What other things can you focus on as well? I've always been a big believer in, I just have a lot more passions and interests outside of soccer as well. I think soccer is very fulfilling in so many ways and has brought me all over the world. I'll forever be thankful, but it isn't my whole life. And it can be, especially as you get older, a little redundant in ways. So where am I challenging myself? What areas am I growing in? And certainly when you have an injury, you have a little bit more time on your hands, do that kind of stuff. So taking advantage of those moments as well to keep growing as a person outside of soccer, I think is really important for me, and not just getting like sucked into the one thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Just on that point, when you do that, do you have a goal? One of the things that cybersecurity professionals are really passionate about is that protective role that, they are standing in between these attackers and protecting. Do you have a similar goal as you're trying to go through this? I want to be here by then, or is it just enjoy the recovery and try to work your way through it?
Yeah, I definitely think there's an end goal. I think, if we're talking about my knee injury, it's obviously you want to get back on the field. But I think in order to really reach your goal, I really did try to break down, like, how did we even get here? What are we overcoming? So I think if you don't understand the problem, so to speak, then, you might get 6 months down the road, but maybe the same problem still exists that you didn't address. That's going to put you at more risk for injury or more risk for, a security attack or whatever it is. So really like breaking down the process and understanding each kind of like foundational building block that you're working with this big goal in mind. So for me, of course, it's always getting back out on the field and being strong, but what caused this breakdown to begin with? Is there an area on my body that was overcompensating and it just took it no longer? And so how do I build that area back? Maybe it's a mechanics thing. Maybe it's just a muscle thing or a strength thing. So kind of really like breaking everything down to then when you come back, like I didn't want to just come back the same thing. And that's kind of impossible. Like, how can we come back better? How can we come back more safe and stronger and put in a position that this doesn't happen again?
That's a great point. Changing gears a little bit to the trailblazing part of the conversation. One of the things I've always enjoyed watching you and the team in soccer is the individual celebration after the goal, but then again, coming together as that team. And I think you said it so well earlier, your love about it is this kind of individualness and the team piece. You had an iconic pose after the free kick against France, and that smile on your face is just pure joy. But then once you got in with the teammates, I mean, there was a completely different persona. Where did the pose come from? Is that something that like you rehearse in front of the mirror and really kind of get it down? Is that spontaneous? How does that happen?
I did it one time before leaving for the World Cup in a friendly we had in Denver against Australia, I think. I don't know where it came from, to be honest, where the original thought to do it was. I mean, make no mistake, I like attention and I do not shy away from it. And I view myself as, of course, I'm an athlete, that's obvious, but I view myself as an entertainer in a big way. I mean, I think sports are incredible for all the things they bring out, but like you want it to be fun. If I'm going to be in front of and commit my life and, sacrifice all this time that I have to do training alone and all of that, like I don't train alone. So, I can get in front of all these people and not do anything. I never understood that. I think too, like I haven't been the player that's always scored a lot of the goals. And I never understood when people score the goal, that's the whole point of the game. And they're just like, yeah, I scored the goal. I'm like, this is the whole point of the game and just a chance to have fun and really kind of ham it up. So I think in that moment, I mean, that post sort of became, had a life of its own in so many ways with the controversy that preceded it and the stress, the pressure in the tournament and what was happening in the tournament and beyond and around the world and all of that. So it did something all its own. But yeah, I definitely was like, I'm in a crowd full of, basically 80% French people who are dying to beat the United States. And they just know that they can't. And like, they hate me for scoring, but they also they kind of like it. And so I'm like, you kind of like what's happening. And like, you're rooting for us because our team stands for so much, but it's like, we're going against your team. So there's so many dynamics going on. You have to enjoy the cauldron while you're in it, I think.
Well, with all the extra stuff going on, for me, it captured this. There was always a bit of a suggestion that perhaps you and the rest of the American team wouldn't be able to win. And that expression just put away all doubt at that time. There was no doubt where you and the team were going, and the celebration with your teammates just made it clear that this was a team effort, that nothing's going to stand in your way. I really, at that time, we didn't know, I guess, who was going to play you next, but there was no doubt that it wasn't going to even be close. So it was a perfect moment. It was a perfect moment, and it did set you up.
That's the kind of cool thing about scoring a goal as well. It's like, of course, one person scores the goal. So they get this kind of like initial moment. But then, being the person that has not scored the goal a lot or assisted or whatever, like when everyone does come together, like everyone knows that everyone had to be involved. And it's like, it is the whole point of the game. So if you were the one that, the defender that made the tackle that led to the play to score the goal, you feel just as much a part of it as anyone else. So it's like, there's like the two celebrations that get to happen. And it really is a special moment.
That's awesome. And of course, it also has been able to give you a global platform. You have a lot of other passions. You're promoting diversity and equal pay, diversity and systemic racism. These things are like front and center right now. Diversity in the security space is especially critical. Because of course, the adversaries that we face, they're diverse from that perspective. And so we have to have a community of minds on how to deal with this. You've been promoting young women and all the way, down to girls through soccer. You've been dealing with systemic racism. How do you bring these other issues to front on your platform?
Well, I look at it not as different issues. I feel like they're all sort of the same issues. So if we, look at kind of like a real zoomed out view of society, or what, systemic racism is, or just a society founded on white supremacy, if you want to say that, it's also a society founded on, patriarchy. And so having the male at the center of everything, or, being able-bodied. And so you start to get into intersectionality where these things cross. So what if, you're a gay female athlete instead of just a female athlete, or instead of just a male athlete? Or what if you have a disability? What if you have a disability and you're Black? What if you are, an undocumented person and you're gay? All of these things, I think, to me, feel like the same thing. It's the idea that really society was kind of only set up for one thing and everyone else just kind of has to fit into it. So how do we start to peel back the layers on that? I mean, certainly racism and systemic racism is at the root, I think, of everything. And so that is like, priority number one in terms of being dismantled. But even, within that, we see, trans community, being murdered at disproportionate rates. So how do we start to deal with that? How do we start to deal with the patriarchy, within our own systems and our own communities, our own life, to kind of break that down? So I feel like as I've started in my kind of younger careers, I started to talk about gay rights and came out, and then we started talking about equal pay. Little dots were connected there. And certainly in 2016, kneeling with Colin Kaepernick really kind of solidified that feeling for me of like, okay, it's actually just all connected. If we can't see that in another person, how do we break everything down? So at times I've asked people to, be my ally or to stand up for me in gay rights. Then I'm like, okay, then that's me kind of doing the same kind of thing for someone else. And you don't have to walk a mile in someone's shoes, but you do have to believe them. And I think that's where, we start to get into people's different perspectives. And like, I don't know what it's like to be Black, and I never will. I will never understand that. I'll never go through anything, but I can believe the Black person who's telling me what they're going through. And so I kind of look at things from that perspective. It's like, if someone's telling you something about their experience, that is the truth. That is their experience. So kind of going at it from that. And so when I do talk about, I feel like I can talk about any sort of issue around equality, because we don't have equality in this country for a lot of different reasons, and they're all very interconnected. So I think I sort of found that in 2016 as like the foundation for me even talking about equality in any sense.
Yeah, and that was an incredible stand that you took. I would imagine perhaps, even coming, as you said, from Reading and a different part of the the world, identifying yourself like that is a big step, and one that you didn't shy away from. So we all applaud you for that. For the benefit of the folks listening, are there ways that you found for them to get engaged and for them to participate and get active?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a million different ways. How long do we have to talk about it? But I think the first thing really is to educate yourself, because when we think about racism, I think a lot of people think about it in terms of the interpersonal racism. So am I racist towards you, or are you racist towards me, or your coworker, your family? Are you saying slurs? Are you saying these things? And that's one aspect of racism. But the whole society is really set up to benefit one particular group of people over another. And as a white person, we do have white privilege. And that doesn't mean that we didn't work hard. It doesn't mean that your life wasn't hard, all of these things. It just wasn't harder because of the color of your skin. So in starting to understand some of these themes, I guess, for lack of better, throughout society, we can then combat it. And the idea around not just, being not racist yourself, but actually being anti-racism, which means wherever you see it, you root it out and try to balance out the equation. So, there's great books. We're lucky here in Seattle to have Ijeoma Oluo, who wrote an amazing book a couple years ago called You Want to Talk About Race, which does a huge labor for us in breaking things down and us starting to understand. White fragility is a great one. And then I think for white people, no matter how far you're into the movement or not, maybe you're brand new, maybe you've been in it a while, really listening to the people who are leading the movement. Black queer women in particular have always been at the core of every movement. They haven't really gotten the credit that they deserve. But what are they saying? What is, the leaders of Black Lives Matter saying, or Black Future Collective, or different activists or people? And to really kind of take this time to listen and to learn. And then so when you do step into the conversation, you have kind of an educational base, and we're going to mess up, we're going to say something wrong, and that's okay. That can't stop us from trying. And it's difficult because it does challenge everything we really have been taught about this country and our history, and what this country was founded on: life, liberty, justice, the pursuit of happiness. Everybody is created equal, and that was not the whole story, certainly. And so, it's okay that that might be uncomfortable for you, but let's learn the real history. Let's understand how these things came to be, so we can see them when it's happening and then work to break them down.
Fabulous advice, Megan. I want to just thank you for your time, giving us such great insights on teamwork, perseverance, and of course trailblazing in the face of opposition. Fantastic. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, and just stay safe. Looking forward to seeing you get back out on the soccer field and all of your other pursuits.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.